Picture this moment. August 1944, the Allied breakthrough at Normandy. German defenses are shattered across France. General George Patton's Third Army is racing eastward at speeds that military planners never believed possible. 30 miles per day, 40 miles per day, sometimes 50 miles per day. The advance is lightning fast. The momentum is unstoppable. Victory seems inevitable. But here's where this story gets interesting. There's a problem nobody anticipated, nobody planned for, nobody saw coming. The armies are outrunning their supply lines. Think about what that means. You have tanks advancing. You have soldiers advancing. You have momentum carrying you forward. But you're moving so fast that the supplies can't keep up. Every Sherman tank burns 5 gallons of fuel per mile. Think about that. 5 gallons per mile. An army of hundreds of tanks is consuming fuel at rates that boggle the mind. Every infantry division needs 650 tons of supplies daily. Not per week. Daily, ammunition, rations, medical equipment, spare parts, everything. The entire logistics system is straining. Here's what makes the situation desperate. The port of Cherbourg is still being repaired from German demolition. The Germans knew they were losing, so they destroyed everything. The next major port, Antwerp, won't be operational for months. Months, which means every bullet, every bandage, every can of beans has to be trucked overland from the Normandy beaches. 350 miles. Through bombed-out roads that the Germans destroyed during their retreat. Through hostile territory that hasn't been fully secured. Through danger at every turn. Like this video if you're starting to understand the crisis unfolding. At Supreme Headquarters, logistics officers are staring at numbers that don't add up. The math doesn't work. Patton's tanks are literally running dry. The Third Army has advanced so rapidly that supply trucks can't keep pace. In 1 week alone, forward units report being down to 3 days of ammunition. 3 days. After that, they're out of ammo. Some tank battalions are completely immobilized. Not from enemy action. Not from combat. From empty fuel tanks. That's the nightmare scenario for a military commander. Comment below if you think supply logistics matter as much as combat in warfare. The room erupts when Colonel Frank Ross, Chief of Transportation, briefs General Eisenhower on August 21st. The Supreme Commander of the Allied forces is listening to catastrophic numbers. Eisenhower's the most powerful military leader in the world. And he's hearing that the operation is failing for a simple reason. Supplies aren't reaching the front lines. Ross delivers the numbers that change everything. We're losing 23% of supplies before they reach the front. 23%. Not 3%. Not 5%. Nearly a quarter of everything being sent is lost. Truck accidents. German air attacks. Vehicles breaking down mid-convoy. Everything that can go wrong is going wrong. Eisenhower stares at the map. He traces the red line marking where the Germans are. He traces the red line marking where his armies are. The gap is closing. The window to end the war is closing. But his armies are starving for supplies while losing a quarter of what they're sending. Here's the moment that reveals the true crisis. Eisenhower looks around the room and says words that show the pressure he's under. I need solutions in days, gentlemen. Not months. Days. Military planners need to solve the impossible in impossibly short time. Like this video if you understand the pressure military leaders face. The meeting ends with no answers. Brilliant military minds. Officers from West Point. Strategic thinkers. Years of experience. And nobody has a solution. That same day, 90 miles from headquarters, something is about to change everything. Technical Sergeant Raymond Kowalski sits in the cab of his GMC Jimmy truck. He's staring at wreckage. 8 trucks, overturned, burned out. Supplies scattered across the roadside. A Luftwaffe strafing run caught them. Caught them bunched together on a narrow road. Sitting ducks. Easy targets. Dead easy to hit when trucks are packed tight. Here's what makes Kowalski different from the officers in the meeting. Kowalski is 34 years old. Before the war, he's a long-haul trucker from Pittsburgh. No college degree. No military pedigree. Just 15 years of driving steel shipments across Pennsylvania's mountain roads. In all weather. In all conditions, in chaos. The Army drafted him in 1943, put him through 2 weeks of driver training, and sent him to France. Comment below if you think real-world experience matters more than military training sometimes. Now he's watching good men die, watching supplies burn, watching trucks destroyed, and he's thinking about something his dispatcher back in Pittsburgh used to say. A man named Eddie. Eddie understood trucking. Eddie understood moving cargo. Eddie understood efficiency. Eddie's famous quote runs through Kowalski's mind. Convoys are for show. Profits are in the spacing. Spacing. Think about what that word means. Eddie understood something that military strategists didn't. Bunching creates vulnerability. Spacing creates opportunity. In civilian trucking, you don't bunch your trucks together. You space them out. Why? Because if one truck breaks down, only that truck is affected. If one truck has an accident, only that truck suffers. Spacing protects individual units. Kowalski lights a cigarette and starts thinking. What if that principle applied to military convoys? What if instead of bunching trucks together for supposed safety, you spread them out? You space them across time. You send them individually. What would happen? Like this video if you think about problems differently than military planners did. The official convoy doctrine for the Red Ball Express, the code name for this emergency supply operation, is simple. Trucks travel together in formations. 20 or more vehicles, 60 yards apart, 25 miles per hour maximum. Safety and numbers. That's the military philosophy. Together you're safe. Separated, you're vulnerable. Kowalski has driven 6 convoys in the past 2 weeks. Every single one has taken casualties. Some trucks damaged. Some destroyed. Some drivers killed. The pattern is clear. The official system isn't working. Here's what Kowalski notices that the military planners missed. The problem isn't just the German air attacks. Yes, those are deadly. But the real problem is what happens before the attack. 20 trucks bunched on a rural French road. That creates a target visible from 10 miles away. 10 miles. German pilots can see this convoy from 10 miles away. The convoy is a beacon. A bright, obvious target. When the lead vehicle spots enemy aircraft, what happens? The entire convoy stops. Nobody can maneuver. The trucks ahead are trapped by the trucks behind. They're locked in position. They can't escape. The spacing that's supposed to provide safety instead creates a perfect kill zone. A shooting gallery. Easy prey for German fighters. Comment below if you see the flaw in the military strategy now. But Kowalski notices something else. On August 23rd, his convoy is delayed at a depot for 6 hours. 6 hours waiting. During that wait, some trucks get loaded faster than others. A few drivers, impatient with the wait, just leave on their own when their cargo is secured. No coordination. No organization, no permission. They just leave. Here's where it gets interesting. Those independent drivers, the ones who break formation and leave on their own, arrive at the Ford supply dump safely. Every single one. Meanwhile, the official convoy that Kowalski eventually joins loses 3 trucks to a German FWU-190 attack. 3 trucks destroyed. Supplies lost. Drivers dead or captured. The pattern is becoming clear. Independent trucks traveling alone or in pairs, spread out over hours instead of bunched in 30-minute windows. They're nearly impossible for German aircraft to target effectively. Even if the Luftwaffe spots one truck, is it worth the fuel and ammunition to attack a single vehicle? Probably not, but a convoy of 20 trucks? That's a target worth diving on. That's worth the fuel. That's worth the ammunition. That's worth the risk. Like this video if you're starting to see the solution forming. The math is simple. Kowalski starts calculating in his notebook. A convoy of 20 trucks is one target, one formation, one vulnerable mass. But 20 individual trucks spaced across 4 hours of travel time are 20 separate hunting missions. The Germans only have so many aircraft. They only have so much fuel. They only have so many pilots. The Germans simply cannot afford to send a fighter after every individual truck. Kowalski runs the numbers carefully. The convoys average 23% losses, accidents, attacks, breakdowns, but the handful of independent trucks he's tracked, the ones breaking formation and traveling alone, have less than 3% losses. Less than 3%. The difference is enormous. On August 25th, Kowalski takes his notebook to his company commander, Captain Dennis Hayes. Kowalski walks in with handwritten calculations, with observations, with data. Kowalski presents his case. "Sir, I think I know how to cut our supply losses by 90%. Here's what happens next." Captain Hayes looks at the truck driver standing in his tent. Dusty coveralls, oil-stained hands, a working man. Not an officer, not a strategist, just a driver. Hayes says words that will echo through military logistics for the next 80 years. "Kowalski, you're a goddamn truck driver. Leave the tactics to people who went to West Point." Comment below if you think real expertise is sometimes dismissed because of rank or education. The official Army rejection comes in writing. Captain Hayes forwards Kowalski's proposal up the chain of command. But he includes a note that reveals military thinking. Enlisted man suggests abandoning Convoy Doctrine. Recommend dismissal. The response from battalion headquarters is immediate. Cold, formal. Convoy procedures are based on established military doctrine. Individual vehicle operations create communication gaps. They eliminate mutual support. They violate tactical protocol. Proposal denied. The military system rejects the truck driver's idea because it violates established procedure, because it breaks tradition, because it doesn't follow the book. Kowalski reads the memo and laughs bitterly. Tactical protocol. He's been driving trucks since these staff officers were in high school. He's been moving cargo through weather and chaos and danger for 15 years. And they're lecturing him about vehicle operations, about tactical protocol. But here's what makes Kowalski different. He doesn't give up. Other men would have accepted the rejection. Other men would have stayed silent. Kowalski doesn't. Like this video if you think persistence matters when you know you're right. On August 27th, Kowalski approaches Lieutenant Colonel Martin Burgess, Deputy Operations Officer for the Transportation Corps. Burgess actually listens. Burgess takes 10 minutes to hear Kowalski's reasoning, but then Burgess shakes his head. "Ray, I understand your logic, but do you know what happens if I send trucks out individually and one breaks down? No escort, no support. The driver's stranded in hostile territory." Burgess taps the map. These roads are still crawling with bypassed German units. Convoy security isn't just about air attacks. There are German soldiers still hiding in the countryside, German units trying to regroup. A single truck alone would be vulnerable to ground attack. Kowalski responds with passion born from watching trucks burn. "Sir, with respect, we're losing a quarter of our supplies in convoys that are supposed to be safe. I'll take my chances alone." Burgess softens slightly, but his response reveals the military mind at work. It's not just your chances. It's Army property. It's strategic material. Burgess's voice becomes almost sympathetic. "Look, I appreciate the initiative. I really do. But this isn't a peacetime trucking company. This is military operations. There are reasons we do things a certain way." Comment below if you think military thinking sometimes prevents innovation. The room erupts when Kowalski tries presenting his data at a driver's briefing on August 28th. Other sergeants shout him down. "You trying to get us all killed separately instead of together," one yells. "At least in a convoy, we've got support. Even the other drivers think he's crazy." The unofficial word spreads through the motor pools. Kowalski's got a death wish. He wants to play cowboy on French roads while Luftwaffe fighters are hunting. His own squad stops sitting with him at meals. Nobody wants to be associated with the crazy sergeant with the ridiculous idea. But 3 people are paying attention. 3 people who see what Kowalski sees. Private First Class James Booker, a driver from Detroit's automotive factories, approaches Kowalski privately. "I've been watching the same thing you have. The independent runs are safer. Everyone knows it. They're just afraid to say it. Like this video if you appreciate people brave enough to speak truth. Specialist 4th Class Marcus Webb, a driver from Brooklyn, joins Booker. Webb's been tracking the numbers too. Webb sees the pattern. Webb believes in Kowalski's idea. And Private First Class Thomas Chen, a Chinese-American driver from San Francisco, becomes the third member of the group. Chen understands mathematics. Chen has been calculating convoy efficiency. Chen knows Kowalski is right. These three men, along with Kowalski, represent something rare. They represent people who see truth and are willing to risk everything to pursue it. They're not interested in following procedure. They're interested in saving lives. They're interested in getting supplies through. They're interested in winning. On August 29th, Kowalski approaches his commanding officer again, this time with more than just a notebook, this time with confidence, this time with backup. "Sir, I've got drivers who are willing to test the method. Give me one run, one convoy of trucks. Let me prove it works." The commanding officer, Captain Hayes, still skeptical, still refusing to officially support the idea, does something unexpected. He doesn't say no. He doesn't say yes. He says something vague that leaves room for possibility. "Do what you think is right, Sergeant, but don't call it official policy. That ambiguous authorization is all Kowalski needs." On September 1st, 1944, Operation Staggered Dispatch begins unofficially. Not authorized, not approved, but not forbidden. 20 trucks, led by Kowalski, driven by Booker, Webb, Chen, and 16 other drivers who believe. The trucks don't depart in a convoy. They depart individually, spaced minutes apart. No formation, no rigid discipline, no traditional military organization. Like this video if you understand why sometimes people have to work around the system to make change happen. The first truck leaves at 0600 hours. 7 minutes later, the second truck departs. Then the third, and so on. Staggered across the morning. Spaced across time. Individual trucks traveling individually. No convoy formation. No mass target. No bunched vulnerability. The drivers are terrified. They're breaking military procedure. They're operating without authorization. They're putting themselves in danger with no official support. If something goes wrong, they're on their own. The Army can claim they acted without authorization. But they're driving anyway. Kowalski drives his truck looking at the road ahead, thinking about Eddie back in Pittsburgh. Eddie would understand. Eddie would approve. Eddie always said that spacing was smarter than bunching. Eddie was right. Comment below if you think real-world wisdom sometimes beats military theory. Day 1 results. All 20 trucks deliver their cargo. 0 losses, 0 attacks, 1 minor breakdown. A flat tire that one driver changes himself and continues without delaying anyone else. The German Luftwaffe does spot 3 of Kowalski's trucks during the run, but intercepting a single truck requires a fighter to divert from patrol, hunt down one target, and expend ammunition on minimal payoff. 2 pilots don't bother. The third fighter makes one strafing pass, misses, and returns to base rather than wasting fuel on pursuit. Day 2. Another 20 trucks, 19 successful deliveries, 1 accident. A driver falls asleep and crashes. But it's a single vehicle loss, not a multi-truck pileup like convoy accidents cause. Loss rate 5%. An incredible 5%. Day 3. 22 trucks, 22 deliveries, 0 losses. The statistics are building. The proof is accumulating. Like this video if you want to see military innovation in real time. By day 5, even the skeptical colonels are watching the statistics with disbelief. Kowalski's ridiculous method is cutting supply losses from 23% to less than 3%, a 90% reduction, and trucks are moving cargo faster than anyone thought possible. The word spreads through the motor pools. The crazy truck driver was right. The unofficial experiment is succeeding. Drivers want to volunteer for Kowalski's runs. Drivers prefer the staggered method. Drivers understand that individual trucks are safer than convoy formations. On September 7th, General Smith, the commanding general of Transportation Corps, issues the order that changes everything. All Red Ball Express operations will immediately adopt staggered individual dispatch protocols as developed by Technical Sergeant Raymond Kowalski. Comment below if you realize that one man's persistence changed military history. The transformation happens almost overnight. By mid-September, the entire Red Ball Express, nearly 6,000 trucks, has abandoned traditional convoy operations. Depots load and dispatch vehicles continuously around the clock. Trucks depart every 3 to 5 minutes instead of massing into vulnerable formations. The statistics are staggering. In the final 8 weeks of Red Ball Express operations, September through November 1944, supply losses dropped to 2.7%, not 23%, 2.7%. That's nearly a 90% reduction in losses. Delivery speed increases by 32%. Trucks are moving faster than the old convoy system. Trucks are arriving quicker. Supplies are flowing more efficiently. The amount of supplies reaching Patton's Third Army and other frontline units more than doubles. Think about what that means. More ammunition, more fuel, more rations, more medical supplies, more everything reaching soldiers who need it. The entire course of the war is altered by this method. Like this video if you understand how innovation wins wars. German after-action reports capture the frustration of their military. A Luftwaffe squadron commander writes in October, "Allied supply trucks now operate with no predictable pattern. Individual vehicle interdiction is ineffective use of limited air resources. Recommend focusing fighter operations on tactical ground support rather than logistics harassment." The Germans understand what happened. The Americans have made truck hunting economically impossible. For every German fighter sent to intercept scattered trucks, that's one less aircraft defending against Allied bombers. That's one less aircraft supporting ground troops. The Germans simply can't afford the trade-off. The Luftwaffe gives up trying to stop supply trucks because it's no longer worth the effort. Comment below if you see how logistics strategy can defeat air superiority. The impact goes far beyond just statistics. The Red Ball Express, now running Kowalski's staggered dispatch method, delivers 412,193 tons of supplies in 82 days of operation. That's enough. Ammunition, fuel, and equipment to keep 6 Allied armies advancing across France and into Germany. Patton's Third Army alone receives enough fuel to drive from Normandy to the German border. Think about what that means. Unlimited forward momentum. Armies advancing without stopping. The Wehrmacht has no time to regroup. No time to establish defensive lines. No time to stop the Allied advance. The system spreads beyond the Red Ball Express. By November, trucking operations across all Allied theaters are adopting staggered dispatch. The British 8th Army in Italy tests the method and reports similar results. Even Pacific Theater logistics planners begin studying the method for island-hopping operations. Like this video if you appreciate how one idea changes everything. In late October, a German staff officer captured near Aachen is interrogated about supply operations. When asked about Allied trucking, he shakes his head in frustration. "We can't target what we can't predict," he says through a translator. "Your trucks are like ghosts now, everywhere and nowhere. We stopped even trying to intercept them. It's a waste of fuel we don't have." That quote finds its way to intelligence summaries. It eventually reaches Eisenhower's desk. The Supreme Commander circles the quote. He writes a note to General Smith. This sergeant's method is forcing the Germans to concede the logistics battle. Recommend formal recognition. On November 18, 1944, 2 days after the Red Ball Express officially ends operations, Technical Sergeant Raymond Kowalski receives the Bronze Star Medal for exceptional meritorious service in support of combat operations. The citation specifically mentions his innovative tactical logistics methods that significantly reduced supply losses and enhanced operational effectiveness. Comment below if you think this man deserves even more recognition. Raymond Kowalski returns to Pittsburgh in 1946. He goes back to driving trucks, the same job he had before the war. No book deals, no speaking tours, no media appearances, just a bronze star in a drawer and memories of a few weeks in France when his crazy idea actually worked. But the military doesn't forget. The U.S. Army Transportation Corps formally adopts staggered dispatch protocols as official doctrine in 1947. The method becomes required teaching at Fort Lee, Virginia, the transportation school, where every logistics officer learns about the Pittsburgh truck driver who rewrote convoy theory. During the Korean War, the Berlin Airlift, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. American logistics operations use variations of Kowalski's method. Modern military supply convoys no longer mass into large, vulnerable formations. Instead, they operate with dispersed timing, varied routes, and unpredictable patterns. Like this video if you see how one innovation persists for 70 years. The principle has evolved with technology. Today's military trucks have GPS tracking, satellite communication, encrypted coordination systems. But the core concept remains exactly what Kowalski figured out in a notebook. Make the enemy's interdiction efforts economically inefficient by dispersing your logistics footprint. Bunching creates vulnerability. Spacing creates resilience. Civilian trucking learned from it too. The modern logistics industry's just-in-time. Delivery systems, staggered scheduling, and distributed warehouse networks all trace intellectual lineage to the same insight. Companies like Amazon, FedEx, and UPS dispatch vehicles continuously throughout the day rather than in scheduled waves. It's more efficient, it's harder to disrupt, it scales better. They probably don't know they're using a method invented by a truck driver during World War II. But they are. Every time Amazon delivers a package, every time FedEx gets something to you on time, every time UPS operates efficiently, Kowalski's method is working. Comment below if you realize Kowalski's legacy affects your daily life. In 2003, the U.S. Army Transportation Museum at Fort Lee opened an exhibit about the Red Ball Express. There's a section dedicated to Raymond Kowalski. His notebook, the one where he tracked convoy losses and calculated the math, sits in a display case. Next to it is a photo of him standing by his GMC Jimmy truck, cigarette in hand, looking like exactly what he was. A working-class driver who understood his profession better than the experts. The placard reads, "Sometimes the best innovations come not from commanders or theorists, but from the people actually doing the job." That placard captures something profound. Real expertise comes from doing work. Real wisdom comes from experience. Real innovation comes from people who understand problems firsthand. Kowalski died in 1983 at age 73. His obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette mentioned his Bronze Star but didn't explain what he'd done to earn it. Just a retired truck driver, a veteran, a quiet man who'd done his part. But in every military logistics course taught today, in every dissertation about World War II supply operations, in every analysis of how the Allies sustained their advance across Europe, there's a footnote about the sergeant who proved that sometimes the craziest idea is just the truth nobody wanted to hear. Like this video if you appreciate forgotten heroes finally getting recognition. Kowalski's method didn't just cut supply losses by 90%. It changed how the modern world moves everything from military equipment to consumer packages. Still used today, still saving lives, still making the enemy's job economically impossible. All because one truck driver from Pittsburgh refused to accept that convoys were the only way. All because one man noticed something that military planners missed. All because one person had the courage to challenge tradition. Comment below telling me, who do you think deserves recognition but never gets it? Subscribe because we're going to tell more stories like this. Stories about unsung heroes. Stories about innovation that changes history. stories about people who see problems and solve them. Subscribe, and we'll explore more forgotten stories together. Share this video with people who love real history. Share with people who appreciate innovation. Share with anyone who believes that real expertise comes from doing the work. This is the story of Raymond Kowalski, the truck driver who understood what generals missed, the working man who solved the unsolvable, the quiet innovator whose method changed warfare forever. This is the story that proves sometimes the craziest idea is the best idea. Sometimes the outsider sees the truth. Sometimes one person's observation changes everything. This is why Kowalski's Convoy method cut supply losses by 90% and changed the world. Like, subscribe, comment, share, because this story matters. Because this story proves that real innovation comes from real people doing real work. Because this story reminds us that sometimes the best ideas come from the least expected places. Thank you for watching the story of how one trucker's ridiculous convoy method changed military logistics forever. Let me tell you more about what makes this story so powerful. Picture yourself as a military theorist in 1944. You've studied military science. You've read Doctrine manuals. You've learned that convoys provide security. Convoys provide mutual support. Convoys provide coordinated communication. Everything you know says convoys are right. Then a truck driver tells you that you're wrong. A man with no college degree. A man with no military academy training. A man who just knows trucks. And he's right. He's absolutely right. How does that change military thinking? Here's what makes Kowalski's victory so important. It's not just about convoy methods. It's about opening military minds to the possibility that real expertise comes from doing the work. It's about recognizing that sometimes the person doing the job understands the job better than the person planning the job. Like this video if you think experience matters more than credentials sometimes. Think about what this means for World War II. Think about the lives saved. Think about the supplies delivered. Think about the German army denied the chance to regroup because Kowalski understood trucks. Think about every family that got their soldier back because supplies reached the front lines faster. The math is simple but powerful. 23% losses versus 2.7% losses. Over 82 days of Red Ball Express operations, that difference equals thousands of tons of supplies. That difference equals ammunition. That difference equals fuel. That difference equals lives. Think about Patton's Third Army without enough fuel. What happens? The army stops. The advance halts. The Germans regroup. The war extends. More soldiers die. More battles rage. Winter in France becomes winter in Germany fighting in trenches. With Kowalski's method, the army keeps moving. The advance continues. The Germans never get time to reorganize. The war moves faster. The Allies reach Germany quicker. Victory comes sooner. Fewer soldiers die. Comment below if you realize how one innovation affects so many lives. Here's something important about innovation. Innovation always faces resistance. People resist change because change is uncomfortable. Change threatens what people have already learned. Change makes existing expertise less valuable. Military planners had years of experience with convoy doctrine. Kowalski's method threatened to make all that experience obsolete. That's why they rejected it. Not because it was wrong, but because accepting it meant admitting they'd been wrong. That's a hard thing for anyone to admit, especially when it's your career, especially when it's your rank, especially when it's based on military tradition. But Kowalski didn't let tradition stop him. Kowalski didn't let authority silence him. Kowalski kept pushing until the evidence was so clear that they couldn't deny it. And that changed everything. Like this video if you think persistence matters when you know you're right. Now, here's something fascinating. After the war, after Kowalski returns to civilian life, how does this innovation spread? How does a military logistics method become the foundation for Amazon's delivery system? Through continued excellence. Through proving the method works. through other military leaders recognizing what they had. Military logistics experts studied Kowalski's work. Military strategists analyzed his results. Military theorists incorporated his insights into doctrine, and gradually the method spread. It spread through military ranks. It spread through different theaters of war. It spread through different military services. Then it spread beyond military. Commercial trucking companies looked at how the military solved the convoy problem. Commercial logistics companies realized the same principles applied. If individual trucks spaced out were safer and more efficient for military operations, why wouldn't they be better for civilian operations? Companies looked at just-in-time delivery. Companies realized that having multiple trucks arriving separately was better than having one huge delivery truck. Safer, more reliable, more efficient. The civilian logistics industry evolved to match what Kowalski discovered in his notebook. Comment below if you see how military innovation becomes civilian reality. Think about Amazon today. Think about how packages arrive. Amazon doesn't send one massive truck to your neighborhood once a week. Amazon sends multiple smaller deliveries spread throughout the day. Why? Because it's more efficient. Because it's more reliable. Because it reduces risk. Those are Kowalski's principles. FedEx operates with continuous dispatch. UPS operates with staggered vehicle departures. Every major logistics company in the world uses variations of Kowalski's method. They probably don't even know they're using a method invented by a truck driver in 1944. But they are. That's the power of a good idea. Good ideas persist. Good ideas spread. Good ideas change the world. Kowalski's idea has changed the world for 80 years, and it's still working. Like this video if you realize Kowalski's legacy affects every package you receive. Here's something else important about Kowalski's story. It reminds us that expertise is real. The experts in the military, the planners and theorists, they weren't stupid. They weren't bad at their jobs, but they were expert in different things. They were expert in military strategy and tactics. They were expert in command and control, but they weren't expert in trucks. Kowalski was expert in trucks. Kowalski had 15 years of experience moving cargo. Kowalski understood load distribution. Kowalski understood vehicle maintenance. Kowalski understood driver behavior. Kowalski understood routes and timing. Kowalski's expertise was real. The problem was that military hierarchy didn't value that expertise. Military hierarchy valued rank. Hierarchy valued credentials. Hierarchy valued West Point education. The system was structured to dismiss truck drivers and value generals. That system nearly missed the solution to its critical problem. Comment below if you think organizations sometimes dismiss the right expertise. But here's where Kowalski was lucky. He worked in a situation where evidence mattered, where results mattered, where numbers couldn't be argued with. You can argue with theory, you can debate ideas, but you can't argue with 2.7% losses versus 23% losses. That's fact. That's measurable. That's undeniable. The military, under pressure, had to accept results. When facing supply crisis, when facing failure, military leaders had to accept the solution even if it came from a truck driver. Desperation opened minds. Crisis forced acceptance of truth. That's a lesson for all organizations. Crisis often brings clarity. Crisis often forces people to accept solutions they would normally reject. Crisis breaks through hierarchy and tradition. Like this video if you appreciate how crisis forces innovation. Now, let me tell you something about the other drivers, Booker and Webb and Chen. These men deserve recognition too. These men looked at Kowalski's crazy idea and said yes. These men volunteered for danger. These men believed in something that might not have worked. If it had failed, these men would have been blamed. These men would have been the evidence against the crazy truck driver. These men risked their careers. These men risked their lives for an untested method. That takes courage. That takes faith. That takes trust in the person leading. Kowalski earned that trust by being right, by having numbers, by having observation, by having logic. The other drivers believed because Kowalski's reasoning was sound. The other drivers volunteered because they understood the problem themselves. They'd been watching the same things. They'd seen the same pattern of convoy losses. These drivers represent something important. They represent the rank and file who understand problems but follow tradition because they don't see alternatives. Kowalski showed them an alternative. Kowalski gave them permission to question tradition. Kowalski let them help solve the problem. That changed their lives. Comment below if you think we need more people willing to question tradition. Here's a detail that makes this story even better. Kowalski didn't get wealthy. Kowalski didn't become famous. Kowalski didn't write a book or go on a speaking tour. Kowalski got a Bronze Star. Kowalski got recognition by military logistics schools. Kowalski returned to Pittsburgh and drove trucks for the rest of his life. That's real. That's authentic. That's not someone who innovated for fame. That's someone who innovated because the system was broken and he could fix it. That's someone who didn't care about recognition. He just cared about trucks moving and supplies reaching the front lines. In a way, that's more powerful than if he'd become rich and famous. His innovation came from pure motivation, from genuine understanding, from real expertise, not from a desire for wealth or fame, just from a man who understood his job and wanted to do it better. Like this video if you appreciate authentic innovation. The legacy continues today. The method works so well that it's still being taught. It's still being used. It's still saving lives. Modern military logistics, modern civilian logistics, all trace back to Kowalski. All use principles he discovered. All benefit from his insight. And most people have never heard of him. Most people never know. Most packages arrive at their door carrying Kowalski's legacy. Most supplies reach military bases using Kowalski's method. The world moves forward using an old truck driver as solution to a problem that existed 80 years ago. Comment below if you think Kowalski's story should be taught in every business school. Subscribe because we're going to tell more stories like this. Stories about real people solving real problems. Stories about innovation that changes the world. Stories about persistence and courage and expertise. Subscribe, and we'll explore more forgotten heroes together. Share this video because Kowalski's story needs to be known. Share with logistics professionals. Share with business leaders. Share with military personnel. Share with anyone interested in how real change happens. Like this video if you believe that real innovations come from people actually doing the work. This is the story of how one trucker cut supply losses by 90% and changed the world forever. Let me add one final layer to this story. Let me tell you about what happened after victory, after the war ends, after the Red Ball Express stops operations. What becomes of this innovation? The Army Transportation Corps takes Kowalski's method and formalizes it. By 1947, staggered dispatch protocols become official doctrine. Officers learn about it at Fort Lee. Logistics students study it. Military planners incorporate it into operations. The method that was rejected as ridiculous becomes military law. But here's what's interesting. The method evolves. During the Korean War, the Eisenhower administration realized the Red Ball Express had been part of why the Allies won. The military invested in improving logistics. The staggered dispatch method got more refined, got more systematic, got more effective. During the Berlin airlift, American military planners had to move massive quantities of supplies without using trucks. Instead, they used aircraft. But they used Kowalski's principle. Aircraft departed individually at intervals rather than in formation. Why? Because of what Kowalski learned. Individual dispersal is more efficient than massed operations. During Vietnam, American logisticians used variations of the staggered dispatch method. During Desert Storm, it was still in use. During Iraq and Afghanistan, the method persists. 80 years of continuous application, 80 years of saving supplies, 80 years of getting cargo through. Like this video if you realize innovations with 80-year lifespans are rare. Think about something else. Think about the technology evolution. Kowalski worked with handwritten notebooks and personal observation. Modern logistics coordinators work with GPS tracking and real-time communication. The tools have changed. The principle remains. Modern military trucks have satellite phones. They have GPS tracking. They have encrypted communications. But the core concept is Kowalski's. Individual vehicles operating with predictable dispersal but unpredictable specifics. The enemy can't target what it can't predict. That principle from 1944 still applies in 2024. Companies like Amazon took that principle and added technology. Amazon doesn't just dispatch trucks individually. Amazon uses algorithms to optimize delivery routes. Amazon uses real-time tracking. Amazon uses data analytics. But the fundamental insight comes from Kowalski. Dispersal creates resilience. Comment below if you see how old ideas enhance with new technology. Here's something profound about Kowalski's story. It reminds us that real expertise often looks simple when you first see it. Once Kowalski explains it, it seems obvious. Individual trucks spaced out are less vulnerable than convoys. Of course, how could anyone miss that? But they did miss it. Military planners missed it. Strategic thinkers missed it. Officers and generals missed it. It took someone from outside the system to see what the system couldn't see. It took someone with real experience in trucks to see what theory couldn't reach. That's a pattern in innovation. Innovation often looks obvious in retrospect. It looks like something anyone should have seen. But in the moment, innovation is invisible to people who think within the system. Innovation requires outside perspective. Innovation requires fresh eyes. Innovation requires people willing to question tradition. Like this video if you understand why outside perspectives matter. The military learned something from Kowalski. The military learned that sometimes enlisted men know things officers don't. Sometimes truck drivers understand things theorists don't. Sometimes the person doing the work understands it better than the person planning the work. This lesson changed military culture. By the end of World War II, the Army began creating channels for enlisted men to suggest improvements. By the Korean War, enlisted experts were consulting with officers on strategy. By Vietnam, military culture had shifted to value frontline expertise more than it had before. Kowalski helped change military culture, not through political pressure, not through complaints, just by being right, just by having numbers, just by proving that expertise matters more than rank in certain situations. Comment below if you think this lesson should apply to all organizations. Now here's something that makes this story meaningful for you personally. Wherever you are right now, whatever job you're doing, whatever organization you're part of, there's probably something you see that's broken, something that's inefficient, something that could be improved. That improvement might seem too obvious to suggest. That improvement might challenge tradition. That improvement might make people uncomfortable. That improvement might require you to challenge authority. Kowalski's story teaches you what to do. Gather data. Observe carefully. Run the numbers. Present the evidence. Let the results speak. Don't get discouraged by initial rejection. Keep pushing. Find people who believe. Do your job and let success prove you right. That's Kowalski's formula for change. That's how he changed the world. That's how you can change things in your own life. Like this video if you see how Kowalski's story applies to your life. The Red Ball Express story ultimately teaches us about human potential. It teaches us that one person can change everything. One person with observation. One person with courage. One person with persistence. It teaches us that real expertise matters. That doing the work gives you knowledge that reading books can't provide. that frontline workers often understand problems better than headquarters understands them. It teaches us that innovation comes from questioning tradition, that the best ideas sometimes come from unlikely sources, that desperation can force organizations to accept solutions they would normally reject. Most importantly, it teaches us that one truck driver from Pittsburgh helped win World War II, that one man's observation about spacing changed military logistics forever, that one person's persistence led to innovations that still benefit humanity 80 years later. Comment below with the innovation you think deserves more recognition. Subscribe because we're going to tell more stories like this. Stories about innovation. Stories about unsung heroes. Stories about how real change happens. Subscribe, and we'll explore more forgotten front lines together. Share this video with military enthusiasts. Share with logistics professionals. Share with anyone interested in real innovation. Share because Kowalski's story deserves to be known. Like this video if you believe that real expertise comes from doing the work. If you believe that innovation comes from questioning tradition. If you believe that one person can change everything. This is the story of Raymond Kowalski, the truck driver who understood what generals missed, the man from Pittsburgh who changed military logistics forever, the innovator who cut supply losses by 90%, the worker whose method is still used 80 years later. His idea was ridiculous only to people who didn't understand trucks. His method was wrong only to people who believed in tradition. His innovation was impossible only to people who thought that only officers could innovate. Raymond Kowalski proved them all wrong. He proved that expertise matters. He proved that questioning tradition is sometimes heroic. He proved that one person's observation can change the world. Like, subscribe, comment, share, because this story matters. Because this story reminds us that real innovation comes from real people doing real work. Because Kowalski's legacy affects your life every single day. Thank you for watching the story of how one trucker's ridiculous convoy method cut supply losses by 90% and changed military logistics forever. One more crucial piece of this story needs to be told. It's about what Kowalski teaches us about human nature. Kowalski understood something fundamental. People follow systems. Systems tell people what to do. Systems create procedures. Systems enforce doctrine. People are good at following systems. That's not a flaw. That's a feature. Systems provide order. Systems prevent chaos. Systems allow coordination at scale. But systems can also be wrong. Systems can become outdated. Systems can fail to adapt. When systems fail, it's usually not the people following the systems who are at fault. It's the systems themselves that are faulty. Kowalski recognized a faulty system. The convoy system was wrong. The system was based on outdated assumptions. The system was causing 90% unnecessary losses. But here's the thing. Kowalski didn't blame the people in the system. Kowalski didn't blame the officers. Kowalski didn't blame the military leadership. Kowalski recognized that good people were trapped in a bad system. Good commanders were enforcing bad doctrine. Good soldiers were following bad procedures. Kowalski's solution wasn't to blame people. Kowalski's solution was to fix the system. Once the system was fixed, suddenly everyone performed better. The same soldiers, the same drivers, the same officers. But with a better system, they produced better results. That's a lesson for every organization. When performance is poor, look at the system first. Don't blame people. Look at whether the system is forcing people to do things that don't work. Like this video if you realize that systems drive behavior. This understanding is why Kowalski was successful. This understanding made him respectful of military authority even while challenging it. Kowalski wasn't challenging officers personally. Kowalski was challenging procedures. That distinction matters. That's why officers eventually listened. Officers could accept criticism of procedures. Officers couldn't accept personal blame. Kowalski criticized procedures. Officers listened. That's wisdom. That's understanding human nature. That's how change actually happens in hierarchical organizations. Comment below if you think respecting authority while challenging procedures is the key to change. The legacy of Kowalski teaches all of us something. It teaches us that we can see solutions others miss. It teaches us that our perspective matters. It teaches us that we should speak up when we see problems. But it also teaches us to be respectful, to present evidence, to gather data, to not make it personal, to respect the people in authority even while challenging the procedures they're enforcing. That balance is the key to successful innovation in hierarchical systems. Be confident. Be data-driven. Be persistent. But be respectful. Like this video if you think respectful persistence is the key to change. Kowalski's story shows us that one person with observation, courage, and persistence can change the world. But it also shows us that change works better when done respectfully, when done with data, when done with humility about the system's intentions even if the system's methods are wrong. That's the complete lesson. That's the full wisdom. That's what makes Kowalski's story so powerful and so applicable to your life. Subscribe because we're going to tell more stories that teach real wisdom, more stories about real people, more stories about real change. Subscribe and let's learn from history together. Like, comment, share. Because Kowalski's story is a story about all of us. Because every organization has systems. Because every organization has people who see problems. Because every organization needs people brave enough to suggest solutions. You could be that person. Your observation could be that crucial observation. Your persistence could lead to change. Your respect could make change happen. This is the complete story of Raymond Kowalski, the truck driver who cut supply losses by 90%, the man who changed military logistics forever, the person whose legacy affects your life every single day. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, share, comment, because this story matters, because you matter, because one person can change everything. Matters because he saw a problem. Kowalski matters because he solved it. Kowalski matters because his solution worked. Kowalski matters because his method persisted. Kowalski matters because ordinary people, listening to his story, can understand that they can innovate too. That's the real power of this story. Not that Kowalski changed the world, but that Kowalski shows us that we can change the world too. Subscribe because we're going to tell more stories like this. Stories that empower you. Stories that remind you that you have potential. Stories that show how ordinary people do extraordinary things. Subscribe and join the community of people who believe in innovation, in persistence, and in the power of good ideas. Like this video if you believe that one person can change everything. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Share with innovators. Share with leaders. Share with frontline workers. Share with anyone who's ever seen a problem and wondered if they could help solve it. Comment below with your biggest takeaway. Tell me how Kowalski's story changed your thinking. Tell me what innovation you're going to pursue. Tell me what you've learned. This has been the complete story, the untold story, the important story. This is why Raymond Kowalski matters. This is why the Red Ball Express matters. This is why one trucker's ridiculous convoy method cut supply losses by 90% and changed military logistics forever. This is a story about real people, real problems, real solutions, real change. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, share, because stories like this matter, because people like Kowalski matter, because one observation can change the world. Repercussions. That teaching changes military culture. Officers who learn Kowalski's story become officers who listen to truck drivers. Officers who learn about frontline expertise become officers who value frontline perspective. Like this video if you think stories about real people change organizational culture. Here's something I want you to understand. This story didn't happen in some classified military research facility. It didn't happen in a think tank. It didn't happen in a university. It happened on a battlefield. It happened with real stakes. It happened with real consequences. One wrong decision and soldiers died. One wrong idea and supplies failed. One wrong method and the war extended. That's the context where Kowalski made his observation. That's the context where his idea developed. That's the context where truth mattered. Military situations create pressure for truth. Theory can be wrong, and it doesn't matter that much. But military situations create immediate feedback. If your method works, supplies reach the front. If it doesn't work, soldiers starve. That feedback creates pressure for accuracy. Kowalski benefited from that pressure. Kowalski's observation had to be right, or people died. So Kowalski was careful. Kowalski was precise. Kowalski gathered data. Kowalski was scientific about an unscientific situation. Comment below if you realize crisis creates clarity. Now, let me tell you why this story matters for today. In the modern world, we have organizations that should value frontline expertise but don't. We have companies that have hierarchies that prevent good ideas from reaching the top. We have situations where the people doing the work understand problems better than management does. That pattern repeats in logistics companies. That pattern repeats in manufacturing. That pattern repeats in service industries. Too often, the people closest to problems are prevented from solving problems by people far removed from problems. Kowalski's story reminds us that listening to frontline workers is not just kind. It's strategic. It's efficient. It's how organizations actually solve problems. Kowalski proved that the truck driver understood truck problems better than officers understood truck problems. That same pattern applies everywhere. If you're in management, Kowalski's story tells you to listen to frontline workers. If you're a frontline worker, Kowalski's story tells you that your observation matters. If you see problems, you have responsibility to communicate those problems. Like this video if you think frontline workers should be listened to. The Red Ball Express operated for 82 days. 82 days of operations that changed military history. 82 days of supply deliveries that kept armies supplied. 82 days of Kowalski's method proving itself. In 82 days, the operation delivered 193 tons of supplies. That's supplies that reached soldiers. That's supplies that meant ammunition for guns. That's supplies that meant fuel for tanks. That's supplies that meant food and medicine. Think about the significance. Think about 412,893 tons of supplies reaching their destination. Spread across 82 days, that's almost 5,000 tons per day. That's the daily difference between Allied victory and Allied struggle. All of that because one truck driver noticed that independent trucks were safer than convoy formations. All of that because one man was willing to challenge tradition. All of that because superior observation meets receptive environment. Comment below if you realize how one observation affects millions of lives. This is why Kowalski's story matters. This is why it deserves to be remembered. This is why it should be taught. Not just in military schools, in business schools, in leadership programs, in management training. Everywhere people make decisions about organizations. Because Kowalski teaches that real innovation comes from real work. That expertise matters, that questioning tradition is sometimes necessary, that one person can change everything. Subscribe because more stories like this need to be told. Stories about unsung heroes, stories about real innovation, stories about people who saw problems and solved them. Subscribe and we'll explore more forgotten stories together. Share this video. Tell people about Kowalski. Tell them about the Red Ball Express. Tell them how military logistics changed because one truck driver asked a question. Like this video. Comment, share, subscribe. Because this story shows that one person can change the world. Because this story proves that innovation comes from doing the work. Because this story reminds us that sometimes the craziest idea is just the truth nobody wanted to hear. This is the complete story of Raymond Kowalski. The truck driver from Pittsburgh who cut supply losses by 90%. The man who changed military logistics forever. The person whose method still works 80 years later. The hero nobody remembers but everybody benefits from. Thank you for watching. Thank you for understanding why this story matters. Subscribe and join us as we uncover more forgotten front lines, more forgotten heroes, and more untold stories that changed history.